The product list is a React server component that can get data directly from the database. Now, we want to create an administration interface that will allow us to add a new product to the product list. We often call that a mutation. This wording actually comes from GraphQL that distinguishes queries that get the data, so React server components in React, and mutations that can create, update, or delete some data or any other kind of server action that we call server action in Next.js and React. So server actions, as their name indicates, do not need any kind of client-side JavaScript to run, even though they can still be used in client-side components. But here we are going to use a server-side form with a server action. We are going to do everything on the server. Here we have the form, we create a new product, save the change, and we can see it on the product list. So now let's take a look at the code that implements this. So here we have the product administration area that displays two components, a product creation form and a product reset button, which is just a thing for development that allows us to reset the list of products. So let's take a look at the product creation form. Okay, if we jump to its definition, we see that it's a server component. It's not using use client, even though it could be possible. If we enable the use client here, nothing happens. It just keeps working as is. It's just that now it will also render client-side, involving more client-side JavaScript, more computation, and just more loading time before it's interactive. So we prefer to keep it a React server component, which is the default and the most performant solution. We see that it displays the form, and it's using the action attribute, which is actually a default HTML attribute. It exists in any kind of form. It's not using the usual client-side submit that I'm showing here in comments. That would be way more verbose. We would need to parse the event to create a JSON, fetch to the API, so on, and then create an API route to update the form. We don't need any of that with a server action. Okay, we just display the form, create a button to submit the form, and then we have this action. So let's dig what it does. So it's a server function that gets the form data as input. Form data is a structure from the web platform, so something that is available in JavaScript anywhere that represents a form. So I can get the different inputs of the form. I log stuff. I verify that the product is correct because here we are server side, so we need to validate the user inputs. Of course, we cannot trust the user, so we must check that the form has been filled correctly. Then we call the add product function, which actually comes from the database here. So if we check it out, it's just adding a product to the product list using the database helper that we have. So we can see here that the replace product is a function that updates the file where I stored the product. So it's really simulating a database. This server action is simply checking that the form data are correct and then adding the product to the database. And we can call it like this from the server. And it just works. For this to work, next we'll do some kind of build time magic so that the server-side code never leaks client-side despite the form being interactive there. You might be used to concepts like RPC communication, remote procedure call. This is kind of similar. The server action is a remote procedure call that is generated on the fly by Next during compilation. I'd like to mention here the backend for frontend pattern. The idea is that Next.js is a framework to craft backends for frontends. Server actions, React server components, this is really the backend for frontend paradigm, which initially has been proposed to have a kind of intermediate layers between server APIs that communicates with other server and APIs that communicates with client-side code for interfaces, because they actually have different requirements. If only the fact that APIs that must provide data to client-side code, to client-side interfaces are public. They can be accessed from the user's browser in order for the user to get some data, while server-to-server communication is different. It's private, it's happening in a safe environment, or at least an environment that is secured differently. So it's really two worlds. And Next, you really make point of using the server efficiently to create new front-end. It's not really a framework to create backends and open APIs for other applications. The backend and the front-end are deeply integrated, and that's really the idea of backend for front-end.
If you want to keep learning about how to build real-world apps with the latest technologies and other career-related topics, then start right now by subscribing to our channel and liking this video.